Are you moving to Iowa but you really don't know what cornfield you want to live next to?
What?
I'm just joking. Sometimes it's a soybean field.
What? What the?
Okay, all kidding aside, if you're moving to Iowa, you really need to have a framework of where to live in Iowa. And that's where I'm going to go over today. Welcome to the channel, or welcome back. You know, as much as I love making these videos, I also love helping you with your real estate needs. And I am a licensed realtor here in the state of Iowa. So if you have any questions about real estate, my number is popping up down below. Shoot me a text, send me an email. I am the one that answers those. So let me know if you have any questions. So what is the first thing you really need to decide on when you're moving to Iowa? Well, that really comes down to the lifestyle that you want to live. You know, Iowa is, small as some people think it is. There actually is really three distinct different lifestyles. You know, the first one is city living, which in Iowa is kind of sparse and in between, but we do have it. Second is small town Iowa. This is probably what Iowa is most known for. And the third one, which you may not think about, is actually rural living. Now, it is different than small town living, just so you know, but those are the three different lifestyles. So you have to really decide which one's for you. You know, let's cover city living. What are the benefits? What are some of the downfalls? Well, the benefits of living in a larger city is that you have a lot of the amenities that larger cities have. You know, one that comes to mind is, say Uber Eats, delivery, something that's really close by that you're not going to get in those other two lifestyles. I can speak to this from experience. I had a roommate when I first moved to the Davenport area, and he would order every single meal out. As much as he ordered out, there's no way that he could be living in a small town or out in rural Iowa because he didn't know how to cook, I swear. Now, he ordered so much that our Uber drivers, Uber Eats, Grubhub, pretty sure they knew him by first name. So if that's somebody that's, like you, well, you may want to look at the city as an option because the other two are not going to have that. Now, what are your options as far as cities in Iowa? Well, we have a few. The largest and biggest is the Des Moines metro area, which is smack dab in the middle. You have Cedar Rapids, which is on the east side, Council Bluffs, you have Sioux City, and then where I'm at is Davenport or the Quad Cities. And those are the major city centers in Iowa. There's a few other minor cities as well, but those are your options when you're moving to Iowa as far as cities go. Other benefits of living in a city are you're close to a lot of entertainment, you're close to a lot of shopping, you don't have to go a long ways to get to a lot of those different things. Your neighbors are going to be pretty close spaced together just because that's the nature of the city. So those are some things that you really got to think about as far as lifestyle. Is that what you want? Now, Iowa is really known for its small towns, and the reason being is we have a ton of them here in Iowa. So what is small town living? I can speak to this because I grew up in a small town, only about 1,500 people. That's pretty small for a lot of people when they're not used to it. So what is it like living in a town of only about 1,500 people? Well, you have a really tight-knit community, almost too much in some cases. People are gonna know everything that's going on with just about everybody in that city or small town. It's a really good benefit because you get a lot of support from your neighbors. Back home, I still have a neighbor that I would give my key to, my car, to my house. They have me on speed dial. It's just basically like family there. But on the flip side is if you don't want people knowing everything that you're doing, small town probably isn't going to be for you. Small towns also are going to miss some of those amenities that you might have in a bigger city. Growing up, I always saw, pizza delivery, all those sorts of things, but I actually didn't know that it actually existed in the real world because it was kind of non-existent in my small town. So that's another thing to think about, is you're not going to have those conveniences. But a big benefit of living in a small town is you're not going to have a ton of neighbors. Your lot sizes are typically going to be a little bit bigger. Prices of homes, apples to apples, are going to be typically cheaper just because there isn't as much demand out in these small towns as they are in the big cities. So definitely something to think about as far as your budget goes, because small towns typically are going to be a little bit cheaper than some of the larger cities. And then finally, rural Iowa, that's what you think about when you have like a farming family. It's out in the farm, you got a barn, you got some acreage typically. So that is something to think about. You're going to be quite a ways away from a lot of different people. So if that's something that you don't like, well, rural Iowa probably isn't going to be for you. Another thing to think about when you're moving to rural Iowa is it might be actually more expensive to live there. If you're moving out there, you're probably going to get some land with it, and land typically isn't that cheap. So you're going to have a little bit higher expenses up front, and then your maintenance costs might be a little bit higher as well, because you're going to be maintaining everything pretty much yourself, because there's just not the people around to try to come help you. Now, that being said, you still do have neighbors out in the country. They're just a mile down the road, and those neighbors are going to be able to help you out a lot because they are so reliant on the neighbors that are in the rural areas, because there is nobody else. So definitely something to think about as far as spacing of people. The big benefits of living in rural Iowa is it's just very peaceful. You don't have a lot of noise going on, no traffic at all. You're gonna see a lot of wildlife out there. So it is a big benefit for a lot of people when they move out to rural Iowa, because that is what they are looking for. So if that's what you're looking for, consider rural Iowa as an option. All right, so now you've kind of understand, what kind of lifestyle that you're looking for when moving to Iowa, but now you need to kind of figure out the location. Now, as much as Iowa seems like it's the same across the whole state, it really isn't. In northern Iowa, you're typically in the winter gonna get a lot more snowfall. Typically gonna be colder up in northern Iowa. It's right up against that Minnesota border, which Minnesota is basically Canada. Very cold up there. Get a lot of snow up there. In Iowa, northern Iowa is pretty much the same. So definitely something to think about. And then in southern Iowa, you may not get as much snow, as much cold. You will still get those, by the way. It's just not going to be as severe on average. But on average, you're probably going to get a lot bigger, storms in the springtime, potential for hail, potential for tornadoes. So those two things are big differences as far as northern Iowa versus southern Iowa. So definitely something to consider. And then East Coast versus West Coast, that's what we call it here in Iowa, because you got the river, the Missouri River on the west side and the Mississippi on the east. And really the biggest differences there is population centers. In the west side of Iowa, you have things like Council Bluffs, but it's really not huge over there. Where on the east side, you have Cedar Rapids, you have Davenport, Bettendorf. You just have a lot bigger city centers and a little more densely packed population. So it's just something that is a little bit different on the east versus the west. But hey, maybe you're somebody that wants to be right in the middle. Well, a great option right there is Des Moines and the surrounding area. There's some great small towns around there. You have Ames, which is right in the center. It's a college town. So you get kind of the best of both worlds as far as north and south and east and west, because it's right there in the center and you got the capital right there. So you got a lot going on as well. Another consideration when moving to Iowa is you kind of figured out what region of the map you want to be on. But the other thing you got to think about is how close you are in proximity to interstates and really airports. If you're somebody that needs to get out of town for whatever reason, vacation, business trip, anything like that, you're gonna really want to consider this, because we basically have two major interstates. You have I-80 that goes east and west, and you have I-35 which goes north and south. And there's a few others sporadically through there, but they're not major interstates. So if you're not living close to one of those, you're really gonna have to travel a lot of highway, and highway speeds in Iowa are typically 55 miles an hour versus the interstates are going to be about 70 miles an hour. So to get around the state, you probably want to be close to one of those interstates, and that's something, if it's important to you, to consider no matter what lifestyle that you choose, because you can't really move the house wherever you decide to move to. And then airports, kind of the same way. We don't have a ton of airports in, the Iowa area. Major airports are, say, Des Moines, Cedar Rapids. Over there in Council Bluffs, actually right across the river, we got the Omaha Airport, and then right where I'm at, right across the river as well, is the Moline International Airport. But besides that, you got a few tinier regional airports, but they don't really get you much anywhere. So if you need to fly out of the state at any point, and that's important, definitely consider that, because it's going to be hard to get to some of those depending on where you choose. But hey, I believe Iowa is one of the greatest states to live in, and because of that, I help a ton of people. So if you have any questions about your real estate needs, like I said, my number's popping up below. Give me a text, send me a call, and I'll help answer those questions. But if you want to know more about what Iowa is like to actually live in, well, I cover a little bit more in this video right here, so hit it up.